they,
But you had to doctor there.
yeah,
It's
they,
like
yes.
college.
Hello, folks. I'll call this meeting to order of the House Subcommittee on Appropriations on Military and Veterans Affairs and State Police. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Here.
Representatives Wilson.
Here.
Raybeck.
Here.
Morse.
Here.
Cabot. Green.
Present.
Slaw.
Here.
You have one.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Wilson moves to excuse absent members. Without any objections, all absent members are excused. No objections, okay. Rep. Slaw moves to approve the minutes from the prior meeting on, we have 3 of them today, we'll do them each separately. So Rep. Slaw moves to approve the minutes from the 2/13 meeting. Without any objections, the minutes are approved. Rep. Braybeck moves to approve the minutes from the prior meeting on 2/27. Without objection, the minutes are approved. And Vice Chair Wilson moves to approve the minutes from the prior meeting on 3/5. Without any objections, the minutes are approved. Great. We'll move right into our program today then. We have the folks from the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency. We have Director Brian Love. Thank you for being with us. And Acting Deputy Director Todd Butler to present on the agency's operations and budget findings and recommendations on its study on veteran homelessness and on activities of the Eliminating Veteran Homelessness Grant Program. And I will allow you to jump right into things. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to start out by thanking Chair Morgan, Minority Vice Chair Wilson, Majority Vice Chair Wilson, Minority Vice Chair Cabot, and all the members of this esteemed committee for inviting myself and my entire team here, including next to me, my Deputy Director, Todd Butler, here to speak up to you this morning. In my brief tenure with the agency, I can tell you I'm astounded by the work and dedication and the impact of the staff of our team at the Michigan Veteran Affairs Agency. This passionate group of public servants works every day to connect with Michigan's veterans and make a difference in their lives. I'm proud to work alongside this exceptional team, many of which are veterans themselves, not just myself as a Marine Corps veteran, but also my deputy director is a Marine Corps veteran who went on to become an officer in the Army Guard. We don't hold that against him. NVAA was created by executive order by Governor Rick Snyder in 2013. NVAA's mission is to be the central coordinating agency providing support, care, advocacy, and service to veterans and their families. NVAA works alongside the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs with state departments, county agencies, community and veteran organizations across our great state to support Michigan veterans. We connect veterans to services such as federal benefit programs, education, apprenticeships and employment opportunities, emergency assistance, and unique state and community-based programs and services with 100% disability rating and individual unemployability. Our Michigan Veterans Resource Center, or I got to give a plug out for our resource center, which is 1-800-MICH-VET, which is a 24/7 hotline staffed by our specially trained technicians to assist Michigan veterans and their families in connecting with services. This small group of dedicated individuals is the nerve center of our agency. They actually are the grunts of our agency and have worked on over 23,000 cases just in fiscal year 2023. NVAA certified over 600 Michigan employers in our veteran-friendly employer program and over 60 Michigan post-secondary institutions in our veteran-friendly schools program. We also have veteran service officers that are deployed throughout Michigan to work directly with veterans and their families to assist with filling out and filing for their benefits. And also connecting them to local organizations to help address their current situations. The Michigan Veterans Trust Fund, established in 1945 as a $50 million trust to help wartime era veterans with emergent needs. In 2021, it was adjusted to include peacetime era veterans, 65 years or older, and their surviving spouses with emergent needs. The most common emergent need of Michigan's veterans are shelter, utilities, and transportation. In fiscal year 2023, the trust fund distributed $1.5 million in emergency grants assisting over 1,200 veterans and their families. Our mental health and suicide prevention team is dedicated to connecting Michigan veterans with critical services to address mental health, suicide prevention, homelessness, and women veterans and other underserved populations in the veteran community. Through our Veteran Connector program, a suicide prevention initiative with the Michigan's Governor's Challenge, over 300 organizations across the state that have changed their screening questions from, are you a veteran, to, have you or a family member ever served in the military? This program provides the organizations with veteran-specific information to connect them to the appropriate benefits and resources. NVAA is also a recipient of the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program. The $750,000 in the grant funding from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs supports the mental wellness of Michigan veterans and their family members. The program identifies specific risk factors that cause mental health struggles and helps address these issues. Homelessness is the most critical issue facing Michigan veterans today. According to the 2023 Michigan's Veteran Homelessness Report, which we have copies here if any of you haven't received it yet, states that there are at least 1,657 homeless veterans in the state of Michigan. As a former Marine, well, I should back up. There's no such thing as a former Marine. As a Marine who's proudly served, one homeless veteran is one too many, in my view. But let us go one step further and really see who these veterans are. 91% of Michigan's homeless veterans are male. 59% are age 55 years or older. 49% are white and 42% are black. Over half, 52% of Michigan's homeless veterans have at least one disability. 31% have physical disabilities. 31% have a mental health disorder. 19% have a chronic health condition. 96% of Michigan's homeless veterans are adult-only households. And finally, the majority of Michigan's homeless veterans, 55%, their prior living situation included an emergency shelter. This data paints a pretty grim picture of the reality of being a homeless veteran in the state of Michigan. Based on the data and feedback from the veteran community and our partners, and with $2 million in the fiscal year 2024 budget, NVAA created the Michigan Veterans Homeless Prevention Grant. The grant of $150,000 each will be used for a variety of initiatives to assist homeless veterans, such as creating homes out of shipping containers, renovating a homeless shelter, and creating transitional housing. We are excited to see this program impact homeless veteran populations in our state. The fiscal year 2025 proposed budget includes $1.5 million to continue the Michigan Veterans Homelessness Prevention Grant, and we are eager to continue this impactful program for our veterans. With all the great work being done in this space, there's always room for improvement. One major challenge for our partner organizations in applying for this grant is the policy on distribution of funding requiring it to be reimbursed versus advanced. For many of our partners, this means that once they have been awarded the grant, they must fundraise to have access to the funding. We have many partners who sent letters of intent and then decided not to apply based on this barrier to accessing the funding. This requires a lot of extra work for organizations already strapped for funding and resources and time. Now I would like to introduce to you our acting Deputy Director, Todd Butler, to go a little bit more in depth with you about NVAA, the challenge of homeless veterans, and recommendations for your consideration for working with us to eradicate homelessness among those who have served our country. Thank you. Todd.
Thank you, Director, and thank you all for having us here this morning. We've prepared a brief presentation for you. You can see up on the screens. Just understand this is not an exhaustive overview of all of the initiatives MVAA conquers on a daily and annual basis. This just digs in a little bit deeper into the areas of interest that you've all shared with us that you'd like to hear more about. If I can direct your attention to our next slide. This is an overview of our organizational structure. As you can see, I've highlighted the internal operations and memorial affairs section up here on the slide. The reason for that is to bring your attention to that division as a brand new division that we created in FY23 beginning October 1st of last year. This is where we've nested the bulk of the work that you all have asked about specifics with, and we'll talk more about it as we go through the slides. The agency also has a strategic outreach division which oversees our veteran service officer provisions and our strategy and outreach section. This next slide is a brief overview of the proposed budget for FY25. I'll dig more into detail on that as we go through this presentation. I'll start out with our strategic outreach division first, specifically regarding veteran service officers. As you can see, there are 242 VSOs across the state assisting veterans and their dependents with connection to federal benefits. The bulk of the VSOs work for either a county veteran affairs office or one of the prominent veteran service organizations such as the American Legion, VFW, DAV, and Vietnam Veterans of America. The funding for the positions within these two entities in large part comes from the grants administered by the MVAA. Even with so many veteran service officers working across the state, only about 21% of Michigan veterans are currently connected to federal benefits, such as disability compensation, veteran pensions, survivor, and burial benefits. Michigan currently stands about 5.5% below the national average for having veterans connected to these benefits. In order to have a stronger impact on connecting more veterans to their benefits, we recommend a sharper increase in funding for these grants employing VSOs either at the county VA offices or within the service organizations. The recommended budget of $4.2 million will sustain the current VSO capacity, but with an increase closer to $5 million per organization, they can hire additional VSOs connecting even more veterans to their benefits. Additionally, we're already taking actions to streamline the authorized use of funds allocated within these grants so that the recipients are challenged with targeting veterans who have never been connected with benefits before. This is a slight change from what has been allowed in the past. Shifting to the next slide and bringing your attention to our internal operations and memorial affairs division. As you can see, our communications section has a targeted approach to getting the word out about mental health and suicide prevention, as well as dedicated campaigns recognizing Michigan's veterans population and encouraging our veterans to connect with their benefits. We also put a strong focus on our Veteran Resource Service Center. As the director mentioned, over 25,000 cases were handled by the Resource Center staff last year, which represented a 15% increase over the cases that they handled the year prior. The number one request we get from callers to the Resource Center is seeking information about their benefits. Our next slide, as I mentioned earlier, we've created a new section within the agency to focus specifically on mental health and suicide prevention. This section consists of 5 staffs led by Erica Hoover, who unfortunately isn't with us here today. She's off on personal leave. Her team oversees the agency's efforts to address mental health and suicide among Michigan's veterans, handles the veteran homelessness efforts, as well as connecting with women and underserved veteran populations across the state. We're focusing our efforts on training our staff and community partners to combat veteran suicide across the state with a couple specific areas around mental health first aid training and awareness with lethal means and safe storage gun laws. The section's also responsible, as the director spoke on earlier, for the administration of the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant that's administered to us through the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. That $750,000 annual award that we receive is currently employing 2 community health technicians within the agency, covers the cost of the Unite Michigan platform, which is a closed-loop referral platform that ensures veterans in crisis can be easily connected to the appropriate emergent services that they need. This year, we're expanding our reach with that funding to partner with Zero Day, a nonprofit organization in southwestern Michigan, to employ even more staff to work with veterans in need. Moving on to our next slide and focusing on veteran homelessness. One of the new positions within the mental health and suicide prevention section is a homeless veteran specialist who oversees the agency's efforts to address the homeless veteran crisis in Michigan. As Director Love previously mentioned, homelessness is a major issue for Michigan veterans and therefore a major issue for the agency as well. With your support, our agency is committed to addressing and overcoming this crisis. Thanks to the members of this committee, we received that $2 million in the FY24 budget to address homelessness and allowed us to create the Michigan Veterans Homeless Prevention Grant. When we announced the grant opportunity, we received 54 letters of intent and 34 completed applications. With following the perimeters outlined in the budget, we awarded 13 partners with $150,000 grants to address homelessness in local communities across the state. With the $1.5 million proposed in the FY25 budget, we would continue that program and offer additional grants to community partners. However, with our recommendations and the veteran homeless report that we provided, we can do much more if we had additional funding and more flexibility in how to use that funding. For those of you who have had the opportunity to review the homelessness report, we've made several recommendations to further our efforts. Most notably, we would recommend an increase that funding up to $5 million. The increased funding would allow the agency to administer additional grants to more community partners, but also, as we mentioned, the need for flexibility in how we administer these grants. We'd recommend authorizing the agency to allow grants up to $150,000 so that smaller organizations can take advantage of the funding as well. We'd also like the committee to consider specific language within the budget to authorize advancements of the grant to grant recipients who do not have the ability to accept these grants on a reimbursement basis. We'd also like to use increased funding to hire additional grant administration staff, develop a homeless veteran registry, and eventually fund the Unite Michigan program, which is currently funded by the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant in case that funding does run out. As mentioned in the homelessness report, these initiatives are initiatives that other states have taken on and seeing great success in dealing with veteran homelessness in their states. And as the director already did, I'll close out our presentation with a shameless plug for the Resource Center. This is the back of our business cards that we have up here on the side right now, where we promote 1-800-MICHVET and our agency's website at michigan.gov/MVAA. We encourage any of you, if you have a desire to reach out and connect with benefits through the agency, or if your family, loved ones, neighbors, or colleagues are veterans or family members of veterans, they can connect with the agency by reaching out to us through these two means. This concludes our presentation. Director Love and I are happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Thank you so much. I'll jump in at the beginning here, and I know we have some questions from committee members, but this is an incredibly helpful report and presentation, and also a very sobering report outlining the challenges that our veterans face. And so it's, I had read the report, but hearing you talk through it really is somewhat startling. The number of veterans that we have who are homeless and the challenges that they are facing. I am on a mission to end veteran homelessness in Michigan. It's my hope that this subcommittee will ensure that no veteran goes homeless in our state by the time we are done with our work at some point, working in partnership with our incredible friends at MVAA, the governor, and our Senate colleagues. Candidly, this is an issue that I thought might be a problem, but really wanted to better understand the full extent of it. And it seems that the more we dig into it, it is both a very serious problem and a very solvable problem, one that we can make a significant impact to address. So I really appreciate my colleagues here for the couple $1 million that we put into this program and to including this report in our budget boilerplate last year, and the department for taking it seriously, and the governor including at least $1.5 million in the recommendation, and the recommendation from you all that we would up that funding to $5 million. I will note that $5 million is the original amount that this subcommittee put out in our recommendation last year, and I think is the amount that we should ultimately try and get to. So I really appreciate that. A couple of early questions here. You mentioned a barrier to folks applying for the program organizations. And was the reason for that is that it was a reimbursement rather than an upfront amount? Is that what you shared? I just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
Yes, sir.
Do we have other programs where we give them those funds in the front end instead? I'm just trying to understand what we would need to change in regard to that.
No, I don't think we do, though.
We do. Both of the grants that are awarded for the VSO provision, both under the County Veteran Service Fund and the Veteran Service Organization Fund for VSOs are advanced grants. They get that money up front, and that's spelled out specifically in legislation allowing us to do so.
And do they report back that they've used it properly and everything so that I
Yes,
guess,
sir.
is
We
that
have
the
very
check?
detailed monthly reporting and then year-end closeout as well.
Okay, great. That is a very helpful detail. The other area that you mentioned is more flexibility in the grant program. And I believe you mentioned sort of, was the flexibility that you were talking about in regard to being able to do landlord incentives or family supports or other types of things? Is that the type of flexibility you're recommending?
Under the the current FY budget, the grants were specified to $150,000 amounts per grant. We would like to be able to offer smaller amounts to those smaller organizations that don't necessarily need $150,000, but may be able to benefit from smaller amounts, again, with the flexibility to offer those as advancements rather than reimbursements for those who are in need of it.
Gotcha. That is, I hadn't thought about a lower amount. I was thinking you would want, so that's really enlightening. So thank you for that. The other piece I noticed, and then I'll open it up to questions from my colleagues here. The landlord incentives item there, I've seen come up in a couple of conversations. And I'm curious, I'm just trying to understand what the reason is that we would need to provide landlord incentives to encourage them to house veterans.
You want me to take that?
Yeah,
Many landlords, not many, there are landlords out there that can be discouraged from taking on veterans as tenants if there are veterans that have been justice involved, for example, or have other significant barriers that pose a risk to the landlords. By allowing landlord incentives, we can incentivize those landlords to take a chance or a risk on those folks that have barriers that they may not otherwise take on. There are also several programs, whether they're state programs or federal programs, that provide a lesser amount or require a reduced rent amount in order to house veterans that are taking advantage of those programs, like HUD-VASH and the like. And by giving incentives to landlords to kind of close that gap will open up more housing opportunities in the areas that are hit the hardest by veteran homelessness.
Okay, I didn't realize those federal vouchers required the landlord to take a lesser amount.
In some cases, they do, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the other question around the risk fund isn't that what security deposits are for?
Yes, sir, but often housing homeless veterans, oftentimes they don't have the ability to cover the security deposit, so that would fall under landlord incentives as well.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I will open up to my colleagues. I have so many questions on this, and this report is so enlightening and valuable, so thank you. Rep. Slaw?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask two questions?
Yes.
All right, perfect. I think one of them is really easy. It's on about the third to the last page. One of the things under education and training was lethal means education. I have no idea what that is. Can you give me a definition?
So the VA has indicated that one of the primary means of suicide is the use of a firearm amongst veterans. So there's a number of lethal means education pieces that we present out in a variety of different formats. Some of it's through small video snippets that the Governor's Challenge has partnered with. Other pieces, our staff go out and talk about lethal means and educate individuals that specifically typically firearms are the number one means of suicide amongst veterans, as well as educating individuals about Michigan's safe storage gun laws and what all that they entail, and that it is not an attack on the Second Amendment, and nobody's trying to take anybody's guns away, but normalizing the concept or the idea that people that are in crisis, if they reach out and they request assistance or they have the means to safely store their firearms, they're much less likely to utilize it in a suicidal attempt.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, earlier on in the presentation, you had talked about how many veterans are connected right now. And then the statistic that I'm interested in is Michigan is 5.5% below the national average of people who are connected. So my concern is, even if we were to get more money to you, we're still behind in the rate of people who are adopters of whatever information there is. How are we going to bridge or fill that gap so that we're reducing?
I can take first crack at
I mean, so that more people know what we're doing, obviously. Why is it that we're behind the national average?
That's a great question, Representative. Question in which we've been asked a few times since I've been on board for the last 4 months. And so what I would say is, moving forward this year, one of the top priorities I took upon myself when the governor appointed me was to actually get the NVAA out there amongst veterans more fluidly than we have in the past. So our engagement has been great all the way up to this year, but now we have to really expound it or expand it. And so I'll use me as an example. So as director, I speak to veteran organization groups all over the state now, and I speak to mayors. Now I'm taking it down to the city council, trustee board level, county commission level, to talk to all those elected officials and their constituencies. Because one of the things we've discovered, as you probably see in that report and others, is a lot of veterans actually don't realize they're veterans. And so we have to educate veterans that they're actually veterans. As a veteran myself, I've been a veteran a whole lot longer than I actually served. I've been a veteran for 30 years, but I never probably really started using the word veteran till probably the last 10 to 15 years in my life. And I'm sure there are a lot of cases like that that are much more serious than that. And so we're expanding our outreach to get to as many citizens as possible to then help them identify themselves as veterans. You want to add to that?
Yeah, one additional piece I'd add, sir, is the increased funding would be specific to increase the number of veteran service officers across the state to help cover those gaps where there are concentrations of veterans, but there's not an immediate resource for them to connect with in order to apply for their benefits. It's something that the service organization leadership and the counties have echoed to us for some time, is that they need additional funding so that they can hire additional VSOs, which are that direct link to connecting veterans to their benefits specifically.
Great. Rep. Brayback.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Director Love, Deputy Director, thank you so much for being here. Chair, if I may, I have 3 questions. Thank you. I want to follow up on Rep. Slaw's question because I remember when we got to hear, I think 2 weeks ago, about this stat, that 21% of Michigan vets are actually connected to those eligible federal benefits, and it's startling. And I heard that we're increasing engagement, trying to make the question clear for folks in terms of that eligibility. But what I'm wondering about is, and Director Love, you were talking about going to the different veteran organizations, and I appreciated hearing about going to county commissions and the towns, cities, villages. One of the things that I worry about is where if folks aren't already identifying themselves, they're not showing up at those places. And so is there a plan to figure out outreach, not in the typical kind of places where we might look to be able to connect with those veterans, and what are those?
That's a good question. That's a question we ask ourselves from me all the way through the rest of the agency every day. And so we're always coming up with, for instance, today, after I finish testifying here, then I'm gonna be down at Wayne State for a large veteran resource fair in partnership with the VA at Wayne State's campus. And so we're always looking for opportunities where we know we can go to locations where we know there's a large constituency, and 9 times out of 10, there's going to be at least a couple of veterans there.
Yeah.
And so it's which is one of the reasons why we've been staffing up and hiring more folks. The more folks we have, the more folks we can get out into the community and really identify those veterans. And another part of it is you have a lot of veterans, once they identify as a veteran, then they actually want to apply for their federal VA benefits. And so we are good partners with the federal VA.
Yeah.
And so we work literally, which is why Todd Butler and I give shout outs to our resource center, because a lot of our calls to our resource center are actually folks calling to inquire about their federal benefits. And so we literally walk hand in step connecting them from our agency to the VA.
That's great. Thank you. I had a question about it's on the homelessness report, and the stat is 84% of veterans have spent time on the streets in emergency shelters or safe havens in the past 3 years. Is that 84% out of the entire veteran population or out of the 1,600 veterans who are included in the census for the veteran homelessness study?
Yeah, that's all the homeless number.
84% of those were homeless.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes much more sense. Thank you. My final question is about the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant. And if I heard you correctly, I heard that there are 2 community health techs. You're hoping to add more techs, connect to 0 day, things like that. I'm wondering if you have, number one, what happens there? Is this triage and coordination to services?
Take it.
Yeah, you can take that one.
So the community health technicians work hand in hand with the resource service center. So when the resource center gets a call from, or a call where that shows any indication that they may be in crisis, have mental health needs, potentially suicidal, or have identified as being homeless or potentially becoming homeless, they're referred to the community health technicians who have been specifically trained to go through a battery of assessments with those callers. And then based off of the outcome of that assessment and the severity of their situation, they have direct connections to community resources in areas throughout the state to connect them with the resources they need. But they don't close out the case at that point. They continue to work with that caller through the resources until they have answered whatever needs it is that they may have, and they'll close out the case only after the individual has successfully navigated through the various services that are provided.
Does that include things like food insecurity as well?
It can be part of the assessment they do, drills down to figure out what the root of the issue
Sure.
is, whether food security insecurity may be one of those indicators. And as long as it is identified through the assessment, then under the rules of the grant from the VA, we can provide resources or direct them to the resources to address those needs.
And do the rules of the grant specify a health tech rather than like a licensed mental health care professional?
No, they just require us, if we're going to hire staff under that grant, they have to be trained to commit or to complete various assessments at a minimum. We employed or created the positions to be in concert with the resource center technicians because they're doing similar kinds of work for those callers when they come in.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Rep. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have sort of 2 questions. The first one goes along with our outreach, along with that, and thank you for being here today. I'm assuming as we're identifying that we are doing some direct, we should know who those individuals are from a government database that says these are our veterans, and then we should be able to overlay that with here's where they live inside of our state. So I'm assuming that we're doing some direct mail like maybe we would do inside of our offices, and not just the whole broad approach. Is that correct?
Yeah, we actually do mailers. I'm smiling because I think we just sent out a postcard so I have a lot of Marine veterans in my family, and all of them apparently have signed up at MVAA. So they all get our postcards.
Well, even if they don't sign up at MVA, we should still have who exactly our veterans are, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so of the 530,000 estimated veterans of the state of Michigan, we have over 330,000 individual addresses. We send out correspondence to all of those addresses several times throughout the year. In addition to that, anytime somebody joins the military and they indicate Michigan as their home of record, when they discharge, the Department of Defense notifies us that they have discharged, become veteran at that point, and we get their addresses and they are added to that list. And we send a very specific mailer directly to them, welcoming them home back to Michigan, letting them know what the MVA is, what services are available, and encouraging them to connect with us or a veteran service officer in their area so they can get connected to the benefits they've earned.
Okay, good deal, thank you. So changing,
And just to
okay,
add to that, we also support our Michigan veterans when they actually are relocated out of state. So very recently, veteran, born and bred here in Michigan, but because of health issues and age, he had to stay with a relative in Ohio. I know it's Ohio. But when he passed away, the Ohio VA actually reached out to us to connect him with his awards coming and resources from the state of Michigan, so that veteran can be very honorably in the state of Ohio.
Good
So
deal.
we serve, if you're from Michigan, we'll service you and support you.
good deal. So I guess the second question, changing gears completely. One of the things that I've dealt with and talked extensively in my community is regarding not only the homelessness, but as well transportation. And it seems, from what I'm gathering, that Military Veterans Affairs provides transportation for their veterans, which is awesome. But then as well, we have a mass transportation, but the two can't work together. For whatever rules, this pot of money can't be mixed with this pot of money. Am I reading that correct on the transportation side, or is there a way for our Military Veterans Affairs organizations to work with their rides to wellness through the mass transportation to get our veterans to the visits that they need to get to?
Transportation is one of the trickiest pieces that I don't think anybody's been able to overcome yet, especially for a state like Michigan that's got such a rural population. One of the things that the County Veteran Service Fund grant program does authorize as an acceptable use of that funding is to create public transportation for veterans, and there's a number of counties that have done that, whether they've purchased or leased vehicles and then employed drivers to go around and pick up veterans and get them to their appointments. There's other programs that are out there. The VA does reimburse either drivers or individual veterans to utilize public transportation. But as you said, sir, that it's somewhat convoluted, to put it politely. A lot of those don't overlap well or communicate well with each other. And it's something we continue as an agency to look at continuously to try to figure out how we can overcome those challenges. There's been several recommendations by our agency to the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs to try to come up with solutions as well. It's an ongoing conversation and an issue that we're continuously trying to overcome.
If you could, Representative, once we get past this testimony, I'd probably like to talk to you some more about that, because transportation is a major issue for us.
Just want to note on Rep. Green's point, I'm glad to hear you bring that up. I think that's sort of my other favorite thing to work on is public transportation, if anybody has noticed. And so thank you. I think that is, I just want to note, that is such an important issue. I'd love to talk to you about that as well, because it seems like we have a lot of folks that we're trying to get around: seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, young people. It seems like there should be a natural partnership and collaborative relationship there. So I actually didn't realize that was a specific issue in this regard. So thank you. And I would love to work with you on that.
Yeah, we'd like to work with you as well, Mr. Chair. The struggle with transportation goes down even to where veterans are trying to get to the VA, to their hospital appointments. You know, that's a huge struggle just in itself. And so maybe collectively and collaboratively, a lot of these issues I think we can work on together, try to improve them. Now, getting to zero is very aggressive. I'd love to get there, particularly because I'm a veteran, and at some point, if my kids don't take care of me, I might be homeless. So if we can figure that out before I get to that age, I'd definitely like to work with this group so we can figure that out.
Well, thank you. Rep. Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation today, and I hope your kids do take care of you. So of the 51% in the homelessness report who were identified as having a disability, do you know yet how many, of what percentage of that is directly service connected so that they can get connected to benefits?
That's a good question.
No, we don't know that
No.
answer.
Okay.
But that's a very good question. We could probably try to dig into it, and if we're able to get that information, we'll get it to you. But that's a very good question. We haven't
Right,
looked at
because,
that.
yeah, obviously hooking them up with benefits that they're entitled to would hopefully and allow them to obtain housing or, at least be on their way. And back to your report, a couple questions there, if I may. So back to the times on the streets, it says 84% of veterans have spent time on the streets. So can you just clarify, because 100% of the 1657 are homeless, but then it says 84% has spent time on the streets in the last 3 years. Can you sort of clarify that point?
Yeah, so under the definition of homeless, it's not necessarily sleeping on the street or under a bridge. It could be somebody who's in a homeless shelter or couch surfing, living with other folks and bouncing from house to house to house, still meets that definition of homeless because they don't have stable and consistent housing available. But the large majority of them have actually spent time on the streets, outdoors, in parking shelters, under bridges, stuff of that
Okay.
nature.
Thank you for that clarification. One last question. So I'm curious, how difficult was it to speak to veterans to get this information? Because one of your suggested things to do is to create a statewide homeless veteran registry. And I'm just curious how difficult you think it would be to create that. Obviously, if we could, that would be great because we could get those people, get working to getting them connected to the services to which they're entitled. I'm just curious how difficult that could be to get there.
So I'll use this example. Last night, I had the privilege of sitting in on a women veterans group discussion that was actually hosted by VA Undersecretary Josh Jacobs, who's in town for actually the same resource fair I'm speaking at today. And it was all women vets, and one of them talked about couching and being homeless. And you wouldn't have known it until she shared that information. And so it's a real thing. It is definitely a real issue. It's probably more prevalent than we're able to track, but it's definitely an issue.
Thank you, ma'am, for bringing up the question about the registry. That, I think, is one of the most important pieces of the ask that we have. The data that's in this homelessness report is not our data specifically. We rely on several partners to provide this information to us. Specifically, the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, is where the bulk of the data comes from. That is not a state of Michigan or MVAA data set. I think we could do a much better job if we did own our own registry. The challenges and the difficulty obviously are identifying all of those individuals who are homeless and getting their information into the registry. But then we would be able to track such things like, are they connected to federal benefits due to a service-connected disability, and how long they've been homeless, how quickly we can get them into stable housing, all of that kind of information. And we would rely very heavily on our partners across the state to help feed information into that registry. It's obviously the agency by itself can't go out and put boots on grounds to identify every homeless veteran in the state, but anytime a homeless veteran connects with any of our partners, whether it's our partners from LEO, DHHS, community and private nonprofit sectors across the state, if they were all part of that registry program and inputting information into it, we could get a much better look at what the homelessness picture in Michigan really is.
And once we're able to talk to those vets will share their experience, which is why I brought up the example earlier. This one veteran, she had no problem sharing her story and telling her truth. And so, but to your question, when we can get along with us or our partners, as long as we're able to communicate and get in front of that vet, they will definitely share their story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on the homelessness grants, and forgive me if I missed it, but of those organizations, of those grantees that got dollars, what are some of the activities or things that they're using those dollars for to try to eradicate veterans homelessness?
Oh, man, all 13 grants. So some of them are covering the cost for housing. So you have several grant programs. So we have 2 Marines. We have Center for Higher Educational Achievement, or Homes for Heroes. We have Chelsea Hospital, the Ravel program. We have the Community Action Agency, which is a permanent housing model focusing on housing homeless veterans as soon as possible, while also offering support services to help veterans remain in their housing. That's where a lot of this funding goes to. Habitat for Humanity in Lapeer, grant funding will be used for single-family home renovations. We have Homes for Heroic Forgotten Veterans. These are project homes addressing housing and supportive services needed for female veterans and their children. One of the things that I learned last night with dealing with the issues with women veterans and their struggles is, with homelessness, there's more shelters for male veterans versus women veterans. It's really seating for housing for women veterans is really at a premium. And so being able to use some of this funding to expand that will also help with women veterans as well, particularly because women veterans tend to be the ones with their kids. Most male veterans don't have kids with them when they go into shelters. Women veterans do. And so what we can divert those funds to supporting efforts like that, that'll help that issue. But we still have a lot to do.
Real good work. Thank you.
Just a couple other questions, and thank you, gentlemen, for these great answers. In terms of, let's try to figure out which question I want to ask first here. I guess I would ask, is there an area of the state where the homeless veterans are more concentrated?
Probably the urban areas. So probably the larger numbers, probably Detroit or in the urban areas, because homeless folks tend to be congested in more urban areas. If Michigan was at California, the numbers would be even higher probably because of the weather. But homeless veterans tend to congregate more in urban areas. That's where you tend to find more shelters.
In that data that we have, does it show kind of where folks are coming from, or is it just general statewide data?
The data we've got is general statewide, but the highest concentration is in southeastern Michigan. But consequently, Detroit is one of the first major cities is going to be one of the first major cities to reach functional zero in regards to homelessness in the very near future. And that's in large part due to the efforts of Volunteers of America in southeastern Michigan and all of their partners in and around the city of Detroit. They do have a kind of a small or scaled down version of a registry in the city of Detroit that helps them identify, track, and provide direct assistance to those veterans who have been determined to be homeless.
Yep, and the city of Detroit is part of that group, and they work directly with the homeless folks on the street. I literally have seen city of Detroit staff pull homeless folks off the street at Woodward and 8 Mile in Detroit during below zero temperature. So it's a team effort down there.
Wow. That's really interesting. I think one last question here is just, as it relates to veterans who are homeless, I think of our veteran homes. I suspect there's a good answer here, but I'm curious, should we be doing more to directly house these veterans in veteran home type settings, or is that not the appropriate venue for that?
Oh, I'm all for more housing for more veterans, particularly homeless veterans.
Okay. I guess I'm just curious. I didn't know if it was like qualifications wise, what you need to get into a veteran home, or if we have folks who are homeless who would like to live in a veteran home that we're saying, we don't have enough spaces for.
I believe some homes, although the homes aren't here, I think they presented last week, but I believe some of it is there's a waiting list at some facilities. Others, sometimes it's logistics. We're talking about homeless. So, for instance, if you have a homeless person in Detroit, the closest state veterans home is in Chesterfield Township. There's no way for that homeless vet to really get up there unless somebody takes them up there.
Ah, gotcha. That makes sense. I was just looking at the number of veterans who need kind of supportive wraparound type services and thinking through that. Thank you so much. This is phenomenal. Are there any other questions from committee members?
Chair, I just want to add that I'm pretty sure that with the veterans homes, they have to qualify for skilled nursing facility, and that's the difference maker.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone's nodding. Okay, just to clarify, I just remembered that from the last committee.
Gotcha. Yeah, I knew there was something. I just couldn't remember what exactly it was. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, great. Thank you so much for this. I think you've given us a lot to consider and think about. And I really, really appreciate your work and your phenomenal answers to the many questions that we had. As you can tell, this is an issue that is brings a whole lot of interest, and I would hope support to try and continue addressing. So thank you very much. And with that, with nothing further on the agenda, this subcommittee is adjourned.